Okay, so let's have the meteors stop falling during the boss battle. So let's take a look at the scroll to look at the timeline, and it's at the 18-second mark that it comes to a complete stop. So we want the meteors to stop right around that time period as well. Obviously, for an actual level game, that's too short, but why have you sit around and watch 2 or 3 minutes of the same thing? It's easy enough just to change these ranges. So, we're going to go to the GM script, and what we're going to do is, this is where the meteors are instantiated. So in the GM script, in update, this section here is what determines if the meteors are going to fall. So it's a very easy fix. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a second variable to monitor time. Now, if you notice, I've used the variable total time a couple different places. That's okay because they're not static variables. So this total time is different than the other total time. Might not be a best practice to do that because you could get confused as to which one you're using, and maybe you have a script that uses both a static total time as well as a non-static. So you might want to be careful about the naming. But again, in a small, simple game like this, it's easy to control. So what we do is total time plus equals time dot delta time and what we do here is we also check for total time is less than 16. Oops, don't need the semicolon, sorry about that. Meant parenthesis. So we save that, and this basically says that if it's greater than 2 seconds and less than 16, then instantiate them. No error message. And again, I have the sound muted so you won't hear the explosions. And there we go. As it's coming to a halt, no more meteors. So let's go ahead and make the boss now. So let's take that image, put it into the scene. Let's move it off to the side. Okay. Let's put that at 11.5. That should do. Yep. Now, a couple things. I also, when I first imported this, I also changed the default pixels per unit. It starts off as 100. I wanted it to be a little bit bigger, so I dropped it to 60. The smaller the number, the larger it appears on screen because it's actually a ratio. So now let's add a few components. We're going to add a rigid body 2D, set the gravity scale to 0, everything else can remain as its defaults. Actually, let's do fixed angle, just in case it bumps anything. Fixed angle keeps it from rotating around. Physics 2D, we do polygon collider. Now, I'm going to add one more thing to it. New script. Let's call this level boss 1. Now, I usually try to go line by line, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to paste this in one shot, but we will explain in minute detail what we're looking at. Okay, so we're going to, again, monitor total time. Since this is not a static variable, it is not affected by the other ones. We're doing two things in the start section. Because what's going to happen is this is going to be instantiated much like the Meteors. The boss isn't going to be already on the scene. It's going to get instantiated as the when the appropriate time approaches. So get component rigid body. We've seen this before. Velocity. We're just giving it a horizontal velocity going from right to left. And this is something I've mentioned, but I don't think we looked at yet. We're actually going to rename the object, just that way when we're checking collision, we don't have to keep using the word clone in the name of the object. So GameObject.name is equal to L1 boss. In the update section, so here's where we take that total time variable and add delta time to it. Again, change in time, how much time has passed. More if statements like we've seen. Make sure you have the parentheses surrounding the entire thing. And then the individual components need parentheses as well. Total time is greater than 2.5 and total time is less than 3. So when this gets instantiated, it starts moving horizontally. What this is saying is after 2.5 to 3 seconds have passed, bring it to a halt. We don't want it to move anymore. So we don't want it to keep going further and further left and crash into you. We want it to basically make this appearance where it comes in from the right side of the screen but then stops a fixed distance away. What this then says is if it's greater than 3, so if total time is greater than 3 and the vertical is greater than 2.5, then set it at -1. If total time, set the velocity, excuse me, to -1. If total time and the y position are less than -2.5, then change the velocity to a positive. So in other words, if it's too high up, move it down. If it's too low, move it up. So what we're going to do, actually let's tweak this. Let's give this a vertical velocity to begin with, or else neither one of these will ever be true. So let's save that. And now let's take this and drag it into our asset area, turning it into a prefab. Now we are going to delete the original. And we are now going to go to the GM script and decide when this will be instantiated, when the boss will be instantiated. So we're going to go to our GM script, and since we only want to be instantiated once, we're going to have to set up another variable just to detect whether or not it's been instantiated yet. So public string boss spawn, and we'll set that to no to begin with. And then what we're going to do is we already have this checking between 2 and 16 for the meteors, so we want to give a couple seconds for those last meteors to land. So if total time is greater than 16, I guess we want to give it a couple seconds. It's greater than 18, and the new variable we just created, boss spawn, is equal to no. So if we've reached the designated time and the boss has not been spawned yet, we're going to do two things. Or should I say we're going to do at least two things. A, we're going to set boss spawn to yes. That way this only gets done once. And then we actually spawn the boss, which we have not created a variable for yet. So let's go ahead and do that. So we need to save this for this to work. So since it's an object, we want public transform, and we'll call it just boss1. Save it. Go to the GM object. Oops, script error. Of course, I always forget the double equal sign right there. Boss1. Drag and drop the boss onto it. Instantiate. Boss1. And is a new vector 3. Horizontally, we said it was 11.5, comma 0, comma 0. And we need an F in there since it's a decimal. Okay, so that should instantiate the boss. And boss dot rotation. There. So that should instantiate the boss just once. Now let's look at level boss 1. Okay, so that should do it. Right. Very nice. Now, obviously incredibly simplistic, so A needs to go left more. B, it goes down a little bit too far towards the ground. But pretty typical for an old school side scroll, so basically we just need this to occur a little bit more. So let's make this 4 rather than 2.5. Then we have to change these to 4. And I didn't change the other part here. Knew something wasn't quite right. And so that means this needs to be go. Could nudge them onto the screen a little bit more, but you get the idea. It's just tweaking the right number.